My name is Walter Ulrich. I'm 84 years young. I spent 36 years in New Jersey National Guard, and my rank at retirement was Chief Warrant Officer, CW4.
My name is Franklin L. Gibson. I've lived in Piscataway for 50 years. I was a part of the Army, and I am 100 years of age.
My name is Herman Jackson. I live in Piscataway, 91 years old, in the 7th Infantry Division, was a corporal of the 7th Infantry Division in Korea.
I'm going to speak about the military in general, just as a general informational aspect of the military. Everyone's probably aware that there are 6 major branches: the Army, Navy, Marines, Air Force, Coast Guard, and the newest Space Force. The military, for the most part, in pay grades, all use the same numerical system from 1 to 9 for enlisted, and 2 to 10 for officers. The time that people spend in each rank depends on their progression through learning and whatever else they've done to earn a promotion. I enlisted in October 26th of 1960, right at the start of Vietnam. I was very fortunate in being able to start as a PV-1 and work my way up to the highest position as a non-commissioned enlisted man of E9. I held that position as the head of communications for the 50th Armored Division of New Jersey, what some folks might remember as the Jersey Blues, until the colonel that I worked for decided that he needed someone to train young second lieutenants, and I was inducted into the Warrant Officers Corps as a W-2. Warrant officers, for the most part, were E6s or E7s, NCOs or non-commissioned officers that had large amounts of training and expertise in different fields, and they were promoted to be warrant officers. Warrant officers at the initial stage of the rank were not really officers. Officers have to be signified by Congress. That changed in, I want to say, 1987, when Congress was short on regular officers, so they commissioned warrant officers that they could now become company commanders or in other positions of leadership. For the most part, warrant officers are a separate branch of the service. They're very well respected because of their background and their expertise in their fields of endeavor. And there are 5 ranks right now of warrant officers. They just created a new rank of CW5. I retired as a CW4, which was the highest rank at the time of warrant officers. I served as a W-2 for 4 years and then was promoted to 3 and 4 and spent the last 8 years as a command ComSec inspector for the New Jersey National Guard in tri-state area. The reason that I got that position is because I had the highest security clearance available at the time, and you needed that to be able to handle the top secret crypto stuff that I did. I retired in April 26th of 1996 as a CW4 after 36 years, and really didn't want to go at that particular time, but the military forces everybody to retire at age 60.
I was drafted in 1951. Did my basic training in Fort Riley, Kansas, infantry. And after then I was shipped to Okinawa. Stayed on Okinawa approximately three months. Then they shipped me from there to Korea. Okinawa, I was with the 29th Regimental Combat Team. after all we did was basic training over and over and over, hikes and what have you. That's the infantry for you. After that, I went to Korea, and with the 7th Division, and yeah, we were in the infantry. We were fighting like hell.
Okay, okay.
In fact, when I got wounded, we were on an outpost. The most of you probably have heard of the Jane Russell and the outpost. We were close to that. And when I was wounded, we were on a combat patrol. And unfortunately, on our way, we didn't make contact. A combat, we were supposed to make contact. And we didn't. Where the enemy were, we didn't. But on our way back in, they ambushed us. 34 guys. I was point guard with with the AR. I was carried a BAR, and on our way back in, the ambushes with 34 guys on the patrol, and unfortunate, 7 of my buddies didn't make it. I heard later, but that was awful to be ambushed. I mean, you don't know that. That was really awful.
You said you were given.
I was drafted. I was in the, I think they took the, when they came to me, they went up the street and down, up one side and down one side, and got everybody that hadn't been in. We started out in Fort Dix. After a few, after they decided who and what we could do, they sent us to various places. I went to Fort Belvoir in Virginia. From Virginia, I went to Jefferson Barracks in Missouri. From Missouri, we were put into the overseas, and from there I went to Leyte in New Guinea in the South Pacific and the Philippines. My job was, I was trained to be a heavy equipment engineer, Air Force engineering. The two were combined for all intents and purposes, because being specific, when I went to Eglin Field, Florida, we were a unit working to build runways. And that's where we started off. That's how it was from my training in Belvoir, was to go to Florida and be a part of building runways, roads, etc., where you learn to handle.
That's where I say you were an engineer here.
Bulldozers, road graders, power shovels, ditch diggers, draining, and etc. There's a whole lot of it was going on, had to be a part of building the runway and having it smooth so that the plane landing on it didn't hit a bump and wind up in a ditch.
See, if I could interject here, during the Second World War, the Air Force weren't set. It was armed. They called it the Army Air Force.
Yeah.
But during the Korea War, they were separated. They made it one outfit, the Air Force and the Army. But during the Second World War, that's what they call it, the Army Air Force. It was connected with the regular Army.
During World War II, the troops were segregated. You were in a all-colored battalion, or you were in an all-white organization. It didn't matter. There were several parts of the Army, remember. You had quartermasters that drove trucks. You had medics. You had engineers. You had radio and communication. You had something going on all the time. And you wouldn't, just because you were in the Army, you were part of the Army, didn't mean that you could do all of everything for everybody. Even medics were a separate group of people, etc. They didn't, medics may have had some weapon.
Medics, right, strictly medics.
May have had some weapons, but they didn't. You can't take a wounded soldier and be wrestled with a rifle on your back.
But Truman integrated in, I believe it was just before I went in the military, 1950s when the military was integrated during Truman's presidency. I believe it was 1950. And I went in 51, but it was integrated during the time I was in.
For such things as drill and training, you didn't have to always have your. Remember, what not you're using equipment. A lot of our equipment sometimes was shovels and to dig the ditches or holes or whatever, or to smooth out something. Other times we use bulldozers to cut through, etc., to get to where.
Could I just say, if you're in combat, like I was, excuse me, like you say, your weapon remain with you at all times. If you're in a combat zone or you're in combat, we did all the time. Our weapon was right with us. See, as an ARman in Korea, I also carried a 45 along with my AR. So this way, if I later my AR around, BAR around, I had a weapon because we were like, you know, in the combat zone with what's the so-called the front line. Outposts, you're not so to speak a little past the front line, right? Outposts. Yeah.
So you carried a BAR, right?
Yeah.
A Browning automatic weapon?
Right.
Right.
I carried that, but I also carried a 45 all the time.
Yeah. You don't carry
In other words, AR man carried a 45.
Yeah, but you don't carry a BAR. That's too big a weapon.
Right, right. The BAR was when you're going on
That's like a machine gun.
yeah, right. You're going on patrol or something, you carry the AR.
So you got
But I was AR, I carried the AR when we were doing the combat, you know.
My brother served, etc. He was in the Army also, but I think he had part of a laundry division or something like this. They had a means whereby they were storing or taking care of clothing, etc., for at least their troops. He was in a quartermaster also, whatnot, but they used to talk about he was in CBI in India, where he would come around come down a mountain pass, and there would be clouds before you saw land looking down.
My brother was in, I'm about 9 years older than him, but he was in during the peacetime, and I think he was in 1960, I think he was drafted in. And
drafted into what? What did you say?
In the Army. He was what they call the peacetime.
Okay.
He went overseas, but there was no fighting going on at that time. He wasn't in any combat. 1960, 61.
because I had 3 children, even though I volunteered for Vietnam, I wasn't sent because I had 3 children. So I dedicated myself to wear the uniform in the Army National Guard for the next 36 years.
I wasn't married at all when I was in the military. In fact, I got married in 1957 after I got out of service. Because when I came back home, I stayed in an Army hospital for 9 months. And when I was, in fact, I was drafted for 2 years, and I was supposed to got out in 53, but then I remained in the hospital. When I was discharged from the hospital, they did the paperwork and everything when I was going to, and I was discharged from the Army. But I was so messed up until I stayed in the Army hospital in Fort Gordon, Georgia, for 9 months. And they almost got me.
Thank God they did.
They didn't.
In fact, if you allow me to say this, when I was in Japan, the guy, I had a skin graft on my arm. I never forget it, a colonel, the one that did the operation, and he would talk to me. He said, "You were very fortunate that the weather was cold. It was 20 degrees below zero when we were out there." And he said, "Had it been warm weather, you probably wouldn't have made it. I lost so much blood, you know." So I was fortunate in that way by being cold.
For the most part, the discipline, the service is disciplined. Everybody plays by the same rules. There are no exceptions. You do what you're told. There's this controversy recently about vaccinations. In the military, you didn't have a choice. When you
That's
joined,
right.
you got vaccinated 5 or 6 different things, and nobody complained about it because that was part of being in the military. The military is just based on discipline for the most part, and teaching people how to feel good about themselves, and teaching people to be able to do things that they thought they couldn't do, like this gentleman in Korea and this gentleman in the Second World War. They're the true heroes because they served in combat conditions that most people think is attractive, I guess, or some people gung-ho people, but it's not fun. It's a very serious, life-threatening situation, and they deserve all the credit they get for being here today, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, that discipline is very. Otherwise, without discipline in the combat, you would really be in problem. I mean, like you say, he says, you do what you. When I first went, if I could just inject this, I was angry about to go in the military, and in basic training, I was a little rebellious, and this one cadreman, they call it at that time, the non-commissioned officers that were training us, he called me to his room one day. He said, "Jack," he said, "you're a good man." He said, "but the saying, you can't buck the Army. You do what you do, serve your time, and get out. But you wind up in the stockade or something, you try to do it your way. You got to do it their way. You can't buck the Army. Otherwise, you wind up in the stockade and get a dishonorable discharge and follow you around the rest of your life." Truthfully, I would take nothing for the experience I had, the military experience. I mean, it, so to speak, it made a man out of me. It really did. I mean, because I would take nothing for that experience, even though I almost got it, but it was a very good experience, and I wouldn't take anything for it after what I went through even.
Part of the training, everyone should understand that a weapon was more symbolic 90% of the time. You carried it so they could evaluate how well you took care of your weapon, how well you cleaned it. But it was always cold. The only time a weapon is hot is in a shooting situation, in a combat situation. The rest of the time, if you're carrying a weapon, it's not loaded ever.
Well, I was an infantryman. Could I say this? In basic training, that M1 rifle, that was our basic training rifle. We had to take that apart and put it back together blindfold. You get familiar with it. I mean, you take it apart and put it together, but they had us to do it. It got a little, but I did it. Blindfolded and put that weapon back together.
It might save your life
someday. Try to
someday.
familiarize you with it. And they'd say, keep it clean, because this could be a lifesaver for you. If it jams up and you're in combat, it could be save your life.
I don't think you have anything that has a time limit on, or that you stay in a position for a certain length of time and then you automatically move up. I think it's because of what you may or may not do to earn it. Your first stripe, your PFC stripe, may be an indication because of the way you have handled yourself in training for just marching, being a part of how can I put it? A group. You have to do some scouting and patrolling. If they pick you out, or they begin to pick you out as a regular item to advance and see what's going on up ahead before you bring up the rest of the group. Things like this may react or show how you are better to lead or to be in a leadership position. Just like you were saying, he was corporal because of what he was doing.
Absolutely.
Was what made the margin of difference.
Certain jobs require certain ranks. If like he says, I mean, according to your job. Now, that was the AR, but that was a corporal. In other words, if you carry it long enough, you automatically get promoted to a corporal if you carry the AR. And it's certain. He knows that certain positions require. If you it's like had the platoon leaders. Most time it was a second lieutenant, just out of leadership school, and the first sergeant, he was the man of the
leadership positions were
given
to people
that depends on your rank, what
that
position
learned something or knew something about leading. Other things like other jobs. If you could be a clerk in the office, but you have to have it requires a certain amount of talent or ability, etc. Whatnot, and you display this talent or ability in whatever you're doing, and that's how you earn promotions or rank, etc. Some people some men will very possibly go into service and be a private from day one till they're discharged. Others will advance accordingly. That's one of the reasons they have the officers training schools, and you've got to pass that school in order to be an officer.
For the most part,
go ahead.
There are time limits between promotions. You can't go from a PFC to a master sergeant.
Right.
There are two types of promotions. There are earned promotions based on time and service and how well you served, and there are battlefield promotions. When you're in combat and your lieutenant gets shot, all of a sudden you become a lieutenant. But other than that, promotions for the most part are earned, as they said, or there is a strict time limit that can only be overridden by a need for someone to fulfill a position that there's nobody else to do it, depending on your knowledge or security clearance.
Yeah.
I say that right?
Yeah.
If I could just say this, now they're not draft. I guess for war they would draft him, but they all they make that like a career. Everybody's enlisted in the Army or the Air Force or whatever branch. But my nephew happened to be in the military, and you can't keep that rank but so long. If you don't be aggressive and get promoted, they'll throw you out. They'll actually throw you out. You can't hold that one as a commission or non-com, but so long, I mean, you got to be promoted. In other words, you can't just say, well, I'm satisfied with this rank and I'll remain there, but you got to advance. They don't want you to stay at one thing. That's the military has really changed since I was in. That you're talking about 70 years ago again, something like that. And it's changed, but it's still the military.
My love of wearing a uniform was probably one of the reasons that I served. When I retired, I didn't wear the uniform anymore, so I found other ways to wear a uniform by being in the charter class of the Piscataway Civilian Police and a member of the Civilian Emergency Response Team, or CERT. And I still get to wear those uniforms anyhow.
I have always, I think I came out of service with the idea that there should be a means whereby teenagers would have to automatically, before they went anywhere else, spend a year or two in the service.
Like the Israelis.
For the reason there's a lot of maturity.
That's right.
That people do not get, men in particular, they do not get it between high school and college. You go to college, oh yeah, you're a big deal. But you do not get the experience and the knowledge and the maturity to be a man.
And a discipline.
Yeah.
Discipline.
To be a man without having that military discipline and et cetera that you will get because somebody will give it to you. And if you don't have it, just like we're arguing with Russia now, if every individual that walks the streets today had had 1 to 2 years of military training, would have a different vision of what's going on and how it's happening.